Nepal, you do not minister. I turned it. I thought it was on. Now? If it's not working, I'm just going to take it off. In Nepal, you don't enter a private home or a church with your shoes on. You take your shoes off at the door. And I was reading in my devotions this morning, and I was in the portion of Joshua where Joshua meets the commander of the Lord's army, and at the end of that passage, the commander of the Lord's army, the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ, said, "Take your sandals off. The ground on which you're standing is holy ground." Now, I don't know if that's the reason for that. I think it's more cultural than it is anything else. But the entire time that we were there, whenever we were in the church building or teaching, we taught with our shoes off. So I figured, all right, I'm going to take my shoes off. That's how we did it. The Nepali people are a very friendly people. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them here in just a few minutes. But this was a unique ministry and a unique ministry opportunity. There are some things that are unique to the believers in Nepal in comparison to their unsaved countrymen, as you might imagine. One of them is that when they greet each other, they don't use the typical Hindi greeting. The typical Hindi greeting is to put your hands together, bow slightly, and say namaste, which means my spirit connects with your spirit. And it's a typical Hindi greeting. The believers put their hands together, bow just a little bit, and then they say Jai Mashiach, which means, roughly translated, praise the Messiah. And so when we met people that were believers, it was Jai Mashiach. And everybody said it. So Jai Mashiach, Jai Mashiach, Jai Mashiach. So sometimes it would be 7 or 8 or 9 times in a row. And if you're carrying something in one hand, you just kind of had to get it, because you're supposed to do 2 hands together when you greet. And so that was how we greeted one another. Really, the only other word that I learned was thank you, which is dhanyavad. And so I learned how to say thank you and heard it repeatedly. One of the things that was interesting to me is listening to them pray. You heard thank you a lot from a group of people who are very poor. And by very poor, I mean some of the pastors are ministering to people who do not live in a house structure. They live in a cave. The average salary I got to get back to the mic here. The average salary in Nepal is something on the order of $50 a month. Now, it sounds like a lot when it's in rupees because it's about 1,600 rupees, but rupees are like pennies. In fact, they're less than a penny. A rupee is less than a penny. So about $50 a month. It's just not a lot of money. One other thing that I'll mention to you before I get started in the other thing is that you've seen this, and you saw some down in the front here. When we arrived at our first location, they came up to us and put these around our necks. It was almost like you were in Hawaii and they were giving you a lei. And so there's this scarf that they gave us, and then that was at the airport when we were flying into the first stop. And then when we got to the church, they give us another one, and then they give us another one. And so the other 2 are laying down here. They give us another one as we were getting ready for the graduation. So the first several days we taught with these on. So it's not a vestment of any kind. It's just basically a welcome scarf. But I'll put this on so that you get the sense of what it was like when we were teaching. This was a unique ministry. The distance away made it unique. One way it's about 8,000 miles to Nepal. So that made it unique. The language difference made it unique. Teaching through interpreters made it unique. Teaching other pastors is not something that I do on a regular basis. That made it unique. So it was a unique ministry, and it was a special time. It was a first for me to do something like this. In fact, of the 5 of us who were Americans that went, 2 of us, this was the first time that we had done something like this. So the other 3 that was normal for them, but for 2 of us, it was the first time we had done something like this. And it was also a special time because the students that we taught were very appreciative and very happy people. It reminded me of the concept in Scripture that we're taught that happiness is not on the basis of finances or wealth. Happiness is something, or joy is something that is in your heart because of your relationship with the living God. Because nobody there was wealthy. One man might have been a little better off than some of the others, largely because of his networking ability. But beyond that, almost everybody there was very, very, very poor. So it was a special time. And then I had the privilege of being a part of the very first graduation of any of these students. It would have been earlier than this, but COVID got in the way, and so a 4-year time frame would have ended last year, and instead they had about an 18-month period of time when they weren't able to do classes, and the result of that was that this was their first graduation class. So the cohort that I was teaching eschatology to, that was their last set of classes. Worship, the pastoral epistles, and eschatology was the last set of classes, and that was true in both locations. And so we were able to hand them a diploma, and the diploma was purposeful. It wasn't something that was just your name, you graduated, thank you very much. This piece of paper is now worthless, but have fun with it. Instead, they put scriptures on the diploma. And so I kind of want to reiterate to you what Tom shared with respect to the verses that were on the diploma. The first verse was Genesis 1:1, and you can quote it with me if you want to. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And you think, why would that be on a diploma? Well, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that Nepal is Hindu. Hinduism is an idolatrous religion. They have upwards of 3 million gods, and they have temples all over the place, and they are selling idols to people on a regular basis. And so the beginning of the diploma focuses on a creator God. Could you go to the next slide? I think it's on the next slide. It focuses on a creator God. It says to the people that are graduating and to the people who were there, mostly their family, but in some cases some friends, that we are committed to the living God, our creator. And our mission requires this singular, not multiple, singular focus. And so that was on the diploma. It was something that was important from Tom's perspective. It was important for them to have that on their diploma, to think in terms of this is our focus. Our focus is the living God. Not the false gods of the culture around us. Not the government, which is largely antagonistic, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. But on the living God. And then there was a second verse on there, actually 2 more, both from 2 Timothy. The second one was 2 Timothy 2:15. If you've ever been connected with Awana, you'll remember this verse. Study, or the word actually means be diligent, to show yourself approved to God, a workman that does not need to be ashamed. And the focus in Tom's graduation message to them was on the phrase, be diligent. He said, we've been through 4 years together. Actually, more than 4 years, 5, but we got interrupted. And in that time, you have come a great distance in some cases. A few people walked. Some people took buses to come to where they were, and they just slept on the floor of the church each night. One man that was one of our translators rode his motorcycle 450 kilometers. I'm not good with my math, but I know that that's a lot of miles. I think a kilometer is 6/10 of a mile, so somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 200 plus miles that he had ridden on that. And some walked. I mean, there were people, not that far, but they walked. There were people who came from all different classes, if you will, all different distances, and did this twice a year over the course of a 4-year period of time. Slept on the floor, did the things that were necessary in order to be part of these classes. There was diligence there. And what Tom was encouraging them to do is to continue to be diligent. Now that you have taught or been taught, now you need to take this information and you need to teach. You need to be diligent with the people that are under your care. So our mission requires a singular focus from Genesis 1:1. Our mission requires a scriptural fervency from 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 15. And then finally, our mission requires an eye on the future. One of the reasons that this was important to me and should be important to us as a church is that a number of these pastors were young people. In the first cohort, we had a young man that I was sure was the son of the man he was sitting next to. He was shorter. He looked for all the world like he was in junior high. And that's what I thought the entire time we were teaching. When that cohort was over, I learned that he is married with a child and pastoring a church. And I'm telling you, he looked like one of the Belk boys. He'll be teaching and pastoring long after I'm with the Lord. There's an eye on the future in this ministry. And on their diploma, there was an eye on the future. You need to take this information and you need to find faithful men. And you need to teach those faithful men so that those faithful men will teach other faithful men. And the ministry of the gospel will continue into the future. 2 Timothy 2:2 is an important verse in church ministry. It says that that the ministry of the gospel should not stop with my generation. That's not only an important verse for their church, that's an important verse for our church. The ministry of the gospel should not stop with this generation. It should go into the next generation and then the generation after that. We need to find faithful people and teach them so that those faithful people will teach others also. And that was the third verse that was on their diploma. And the third challenge that went to them. Stay committed to your Creator God. Number one. Number two, be diligent in the work. You've been diligent in your studies. Be diligent in the work that God has given you to do in the churches where you are from here on out. And number three, commit these things that you have learned to faithful men. Now, I'll say this as well, and then we're going to get into the report part itself. Not everybody that was there was a pastor. In some cases, they referred to them simply as leaders, probably a reference to those who are functioning as deacons. In some cases, they just referred to them as believers. So here's a person who's here. He's not actually in a leadership position in the church, but he's come with his pastor, and he's been a part of this series of studies as well. So not everybody was in the position of pastoring a church, but the majority were. And so what we were doing is helping people who simply from a financial perspective, cannot leave their home country to go study someplace else. Or wouldn't maybe even be able to go to other places where studies might be available that are nearby because simply the money is just not there. And so instead of that, we went to Nepal. Now, let me say something else about the cost of this, and I'll get into it a little bit more at the end. But we raised $5,000, and I want to say thank you to you for doing that. Many of you gave sacrificially to help this happen. A large part of that was because there was no charge to these pastors or students at all. They weren't charged for the classes. They weren't charged for the meals. The money, some of the money that you gave, when we pooled that money, it went to help people in Nepal buy the food so that we could eat day after day. They have been paid the people who were doing the cooking. They weren't charged for anything. And so this was all free to them because that's really all they can afford. To get there was all they could do. So a lot of what you gave was not just for transportation. Transportation was less than half the cost. That is transportation to and from Nepal. But transportation in the country, the lodging, and then taking care of the financial responsibilities that would have rested on the students had they been able to do that was also part of what you gave. All right, so let's go to the report. I've got 7 different thoughts that I want to share with you. The first one is the team. And the team consisted of 5 different men from America and then 1 man from Nepal who was going to be teaching. And I'll talk about him here in just a second. Tom Carr was our lead. Tom is, of course, a missionary that we support. Is that? Are we able to put that? Oh, I'm sorry. The team is the first, and then the students would be the second thing we're going to look at. The third thing is the people, the people in Nepal. The fourth is the culture of Nepal. The fifth is the benefits of the ministry, and the sixth is the travel. And then I have some personal observations that I want to share with you at the end of that. So let's look at the team for just a second. The first member of the team is Tom Carr. Tom is a missionary with ABWE on loan to Tri-M. And you had Tom here about a month before we took our trip, and he talked about his ministry, and so I won't go into a lot of detail. The asterisk, as we'll see at the end, indicates someone who had been in Nepal teaching before. The second person on the list is, I think, Chris Pillay. Chris is a pastor in upstate New York, but he is a unique individual. He also works with Tri-M. Chris was a missionary for a while in Mongolia. He has done Tri-M work in multiple countries, not just in Nepal. He's done work in Russia. He's done work in I want to say Romania. He's done work in some other Asian countries. And Chris he's a combination of stand-up comic. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that we were practically doubled over in laughter over some of the things that Chris brought up, and brilliance. He reads voraciously. Chris probably reads more in a month than I read in a year. And I try to read significantly, but nothing like what he does. And his mind shows that, and his ability to communicate shows that. He was a very interesting and valuable part of this team. The third person on the team is someone that Jan and I knew from college. His name is Kevin Smith. Kevin was a senior at Faith when we were freshmen. He was also in the chorale with us. Beautiful tenor voice. And went on to a long ministry in the area of music in churches and at Cedarville University. He taught the class on worship and did just a wonderful job with that. So he had also been to Nepal in the past, and that's why you see the asterisk up there. The fourth member of the team was Adam McClure. Adam is a pastor in Ohio, pastors a church not far from Cedarville University, and has become a good friend of Tom. If you're not familiar with where Tom lives in Cedarville, Ohio. So he and Adam have become good friends. And this was the fulfillment of really a lifetime desire on Adam's part. He has been, since he was in high school, has had a passion to go to Nepal and to minister to the people in Nepal. And I forget now exactly where that came from, but he's had that passion. This was the first time for Adam to be in Nepal, first time for him to be in a Tri-M ministry. And then myself, and you'll notice something about me: Ohio, New York, Ohio, Colorado. There was a couple ways in which I was sort of the odd man out. Tom and Chris and Kevin and Adam all have real strong relationships with Cedarville University. Not me. Tom and Kevin and Adam are from Ohio. I'm from Michigan. Although, to be fair, I don't think any of, I saw that I forget how you do the I. No, we really didn't get into football too much. That's just was really not their comfort zone or their interest, so we didn't go into that a whole lot. But then everybody else from the East, and I'm from Colorado. So there's a number of ways in which I was sort of the odd man out. So here's the team. You'll notice on the right there are two men whose faces are blurred out, and that's because we've been asked to be sure that anything that goes over that potentially could be going into social media not show the faces of people in Nepal. The possibility exists that they could be, that they could be persecuted. Hinduism is becoming more and more and more national and antagonistic toward things that are outside. And in fact, when we were teaching in Manahari, we were told you're going to stay in the hotel and you're going to stay in the church. We don't want you walking the streets. We don't want you going out into, because Manahari is a rural area. And in Manahari, the presence of Westerners doesn't fit. It's not a tourist area. It's not a place that Westerners would show up for any other reason. So people are going to be saying, "What are they doing here?" And would be potentially antagonistic to that. So we were in the hotel. We got in the car or the tuk-tuk, and we went to the church, and we stayed inside the church. When we came back, when we went to sleep, we did the same thing, back and forth. That's all we did. So there was just a level of caution that was related to that. And that's why you see that their faces are blurred out. So Chris Pillay is the one on the left, and then Tom, and then Kevin Smith, and then me, and then Adam. And you'll notice that we're wearing these when we were part of that. The two men on the right were both interpreting for us. And the one second from the right is the pastor of the church there. All right, so let's go to the students and talk about the students for a minute. There were cohorts in Manahari and in Janakpur. Manahari is, again, is a kind of a rural area. It was the first of the two places that we taught. Two cohorts in each place. One that's halfway through, and one that was finishing up. So Manahari was, I guess you would say it was west. The orientation of Nepal is sort of northwest to southeast, but it's more west to east, so it would be west of the capital city. And Janakpur is south of the capital city. And Janakpur is actually like 8 miles from the Indian border, so very close to India. So those are the two cohorts. Manahari is more rural. Janakpur is more urban. And again, in each case, two cohorts. The students were about 20 in the graduating cohorts in each place, and about 15 or so in the second cohort. All right, I've got some pictures I think that we're going to show. This is the room that we were in. You can see all the balloons that are hanging from the ceiling, and you can see the Christmas tree on the back. They still had that up during the time that we were teaching, and we were in a U shape, and then we taught, and you can see in the center is where I'm at, and then just to the right of the pillar is the man that was doing the translating, and that's how we did this each time. So we would say something, and in the Nepali language, the verb is always at the end of the sentence, and so they said, don't say half sentences, say the whole sentence. If you say the whole sentence, then they can translate the whole sentence, including the verb. Otherwise, what they first translate doesn't make any sense to anybody. So that was something we had to kind of get used to. If you had a longer sentence, it made it a little tougher on the translator. But I'll tell you, the men who did the translating did a wonderful job, as far as I know. But they picked up on what we were saying, and at times questions would come in, and they would answer the question, and then they would turn to me and say, "Here's what the question was, and here's the answer that I gave." And so they were just really valuable men to have available to us. All right, what's the next? I don't have the pictures up in front of me. So one of the things that they said was we need to do exercises, and I thought, for eschatology, having the ability to put this all on a timeline and kind of see how things are all playing out would be important. So I created this in English, and then I created it without any English words on it, just the blanks. And we started by teaching it that way. I handed out sheets that had all the blanks, and I had them fill in the blanks. And we continued to use the sheets, but after the first session, the translator, who was the pastor of the church, came up to me and said, "Would it be helpful if we had a larger version of this?" And I said, "Yeah, probably would," because we were trying to write on whiteboards that were about 18 inches by 2 feet, and trying to get the words on there so everybody could see them and put them in a way that they knew where to put it on the chart was not working well. So we showed up the next morning with this chart, which was 3 feet by 5 feet, vinyl, professionally printed. And I said, and all of that is in Nepali. And I said, how did you do that so fast? I've got a friend. I said, okay, well, what do I owe you? How much? It costs $6. I think the ink would cost more than that, but it cost $6 to have that printed. And all of the pictures up on top were reproduced and then expanded from the chart that I had. So I said, "Can you have another one done? And I'll take that with me to the second place." So he did. So for a total of $12, I was able to take these charts, put them up, have them use the chart to fill in all the stuff. It just became an invaluable teaching tool. And so that was a big part of how things went with the students. All right, what's the next slide? This is the same room where all the balloons were and the Christmas tree. When we finished teaching on Thursday morning, graduation was going to be Friday morning, and they took all those balloons down, took the tree down, had all these stars hung. They were getting ready for graduation. I've got pictures of the graduating classes in both places. I don't have them up where you can see the faces because of the same issue that we talked about earlier. But here's a picture of the graduation class sitting there. The only face you can really make out on this picture, and you can't see it too well because of the distance, but is Tom up front. He's the one with the yellow sash. Thank you, the yellow sash that he's wearing. So about 20 graduates here, and 22, I believe, is what we had in Janakpur. So this was the Manahari graduating class. One of the things that was done, and I wish I'd have known a little bit more. I shouldn't say I wish I'd have known. I wish I'd have paid a little closer attention to this. I think we did hear about it, and I just didn't pay close attention to it. Tom got donations in order to provide a gift for every graduate. So you're talking about 40 to 45 sets of these books, along with a light that is solar powered, so you don't have to have batteries for it, that they could wear on their heads, which actually for the graduates was the part that they got the most excited about. Because in some of these places, electricity is just not easy to come by, especially getting into some of the western parts and up in the mountains area. It's just not easy to come by. And so to have something that they could continue to read and study and so forth after dark was just amazing to them. But the books that we gave them, on the left is a study Bible. Some of the men that were coming had Gideon Bibles. It's the only Bible they had. No notes, no sense of anything that might help them study. So one of the gifts was a study Bible. And then the next one is a whole Bible commentary. So they have a commentary on the entire Bible. It's brief. It's not the kind of thing that you would have, like you might have a set of something. It's not that. But still, it's a whole Bible commentary. And then there's a Bible dictionary, and that's the next one as you're moving from left to right. And then the one on the far right is a systematic theology. So it takes them through theology, and all of this is in Nepali. So that they could have this set of books. For some of these guys, the only book they had was their Gideon Bible. So they have literally started a library as a result of going through this. And all of this was purchased with donations from churches, as well as the lamp. And as we're getting ready to leave, that's Tom and Chris and two of our Nepali friends, and they were saying, we want to take pictures, and I've got a number of different pictures of farewells, but this was one of them, to say, wow, we're done, and you guys have been our teachers, and we love you, and we care about you. In fact, in Manihari, they gave us a number of different things, and I'll maybe step down here and show you in a little bit. They gave us a number of things along with this, but one of them was a coffee cup, and it looked like something that probably was left over from Valentine's Day in America. I'm not sure, but I don't think they do Valentine's Day there. But it just said, I love you. And the reason behind the cup was to say how much they appreciated those of us who came to teach. Let me just grab this and show this to you. This says, with our deepest appreciation, honoring, and then everybody's name. All of us had our names on there. We'd like to express our gratitude to you on behalf of Bangnam Church for your teaching on Tri-M. You have made a significant impact on our ministry as you impacted wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of the Word of God. You are a wonderful example of God's love at work. Thank you for teaching, guiding, inspiring, and uplifting. Most of all, thank you for bringing us closer to Christ. 22 March 2024. And the things that you have heard of me among many witnesses, same commit to faithful men who should be able to teach others also, 2 Timothy 2:2. So every teacher, including the ones who taught before, who weren't there, including two who taught before who are now with the Lord, so their wives received these plaques. And all that was done from that first church. Amen. It was really a very special, heart-touching thing from them. So then we went to Janakpur, and again, all the graduates were sitting, in this case, up front facing their families, and there were 22, and the thing in the back is all in English. It says Graduation Ceremony 2024. The Tri-M thing is up on the left-hand side, and it has the date and so forth. And that's why I put that up there so you could see that. They had tons of balloons there. We had balloons popping all the way through the graduation. Somebody would say something, boom, another balloon would pop. Just an interesting thing. All right, so let's talk about the people. The people of Nepal are very friendly people, for the most part. In the entire time that I was there, I think there was only one time when I had someone respond to me in a negative fashion. It's a little surprising given the fact that, again, our understanding is that the Hindu people as a result, or as a whole, are not very happy about Christians being in their country, Westerners even. And so there was only one time when I had somebody respond. I came by and just did namaste as I was walking past him, and he was leaning on a pole, and he just said, I don't want to talk to you, I'm not going to respond. And then it could have been, who knows, I don't know what maybe he just had a bad lunch and was having trouble, I don't know. But as a whole, the people were very friendly. And of course, most of the people that we interacted with were people in the church or people who were in shops who were trying to sell something to us. So all of those people are going to be friendly. But as a rule, the people were friendly, and we enjoyed our time with them. What's the next one up there? I don't have the stuff in front of me. Oh, yes, and they are impoverished. So there's your average salary, 6,650 rupees a month, which equates to about $50 a month. When I got back to the United States, and I think other people who have traveled a lot and been in other impoverished areas have sensed this. When you come back to the United States, you realize we have so much. The poorest among us have so much. And in some parts of the world, poverty is just normal. I was talking this week with Jim Tenney's daughter, Darlene. She and her husband spent 10 years in Nepal. And I mentioned to them that it was amazing, and you'll see a picture here in just a little bit. It was amazing to me how many motorcycles are on the road. And she said most of the people who have those motorcycles buy them on credit, and they spend years and years and years trying to pay those things off. They are way, way, way in debt to try to do this. It's just the nature of people in an impoverished place. So they are impoverished, but the third thing that was amazing to me is that they are entrepreneurs. You walk down the street of any one of these towns, even Manahari, which was kind of out in the country, and there are booths selling things that are sometimes not more than twice the width of this pulpit, and then just goes back into the building. And they're selling all kinds of stuff. In the larger towns, a lot of what they're selling has to do with tourism, trekking. As you're aware, Nepal is one of the most famous things about Nepal is Mount Everest and the Himalayas. So trekking is a big deal. People come from all over the world to trek in Nepal. And so tourism is a big thing. There's a lot of that kind of thing being sold. For those of you who are familiar with World War II history, there was a group of people who fought on the side of the Allies that none of the Axis people wanted to come close to, and they were called Gurkhas. The Gurkha fighters were renowned, and they terrified their adversaries. So one of the other things that they sell a lot of, and I picked one up, is Gurkha knives. And there's one down here, and you can take a peek up at it afterwards. It was very inexpensive. It's kind of nice to be able to pick some, but a Gurkha knife, which was fun to have, just given the fact that that is the area of the world. And they sell cashmere, and they sell silk, and they sell all kinds of things. What they will not sell is beef. If you're familiar with Hinduism, the cow is sacred. And so there were hamburger places. And the hamburger places sold chicken burgers and veggie burgers. Those are the burgers that they had. This is a picture of our Manahari Hotel. It's not actually the hotel. This is just the entrance in. If the picture could have seen to the right a little bit more, you can see some things stacked on a shelf. That's kind of where they did their cooking and selling of food stuff. And then where you sat, you can see somebody sitting at a table in the back. Where you sat to eat was right behind that. And then you can see somebody walking down a narrow hallway, and that's actually Adam as he's making his way down that hallway toward the stairs that would go up to our rooms. And so our Manahari Hotel was this particular hotel, and it was pretty primitive. Hot water was not even a thought. And in my room, when I turned on the water in the sink, I had to kind of move the faucet over because the water came out sideways. So I had to move the faucet over so when it fell, it would fall into the sink. So it was just, it's a different, again, it's an impoverished country. So from their perspective in Manahari, this was not a bad place. But you would never find a hotel like this in the West. When we got to Janakpur, the Welcome Hotel was about as nice as you're going to get in Nepal. And we said something to Tom about that, and he smiled and he said, that's why we go to Janakpur second. Go to Manahari first, then we go to Janakpur so you can have a nice place the last week that you're here in the country. Just to give you a sense, the per night cost of the the hotel in Manahari was $15, and the per night cost of a hotel in Janakpur was $31. So very inexpensive, but certainly not at the standards that we're used to as well. All right, KFC is the same thing in any language. This was right outside of it's right at the base of a 5-story, they call it a supermarket. It's really like an indoor mall, that's what it's like. And so one afternoon, we just went over there. We had the time, it was actually Thursday afternoon when we were in Manahari. It's about an hour away. We went there by car and just kind of wandered around and looked and shopped, and it was just kind of a getaway. But I just took this picture of Kentucky Fried Chicken so you could see that some things are the same. I never saw the Golden Arches for obvious reasons, but Kentucky Fried Chicken, different story, because chicken is just fine. One of the teachers from a previous cohort said, it would not be good to be a chicken in Nepal. You're not going to last long. This was a typical meal that we got. On the plate, you'll see rice to the left, and you'll see spinach. You'll see French fries, and I didn't know what those were the first 2 or 3 days. And finally, I said, "Are these French fries?" "Yep, these are French fries." "Oh, didn't taste like French fries I'm used to." I knew it was some sort of a potato item, but those are French fries. And then up on the upper right is the meat part of this. And then you can see a plate to the left, and that plate has a lot of different, I'm not sure how you would say this, that they're not really breads, that it'd be like an Asian sopapilla kind of thing. And so you ate that, and then to the right you can see soup. And what I would typically do is take the rice, and some of the rice, and put it in the soup, take some of the spinach and put it in with the rice, and anything that was a sauce, and kind of put that in with the rice. And honestly, we ate really well. The people took good care of us. I think they considered it their sacred duty to take care of the teachers that were there. And this was a typical meal. Now breakfast is a little bit different, but you still had lots of rice, and you still had some other things that were the same as the other meals. You couldn't have had your steak and eggs. Here was the kitchen, just to give you a sense of where. Now in Janakpur, the kitchen was actually a little bit more modern, but again, Manahari is a rural area and very poor folks, and so they were just. And there's some other pictures, but I couldn't show them. I could have, but I'd had to block out a lot of faces. But they cooked on the ground, big wok, and they had fire underneath, and they would cook a lot of things in the wok. The rice would be cooked in the wok. The chicken would be cooked in the wok, and so just that was kind of the nature of that. And if you needed to go to the restroom, just again, this is a different culture, and I was really glad that I had my bottle of hand sanitizer, because there was also no place to wash your hands, so at least no place close. And then as far as electricity is concerned, sometimes electricity would just go out. Didn't stay out for very long. It would usually be out for maybe a minute to 2 minutes or something, back on again. But you saw these poles everywhere, and it's just all kinds of wires just all piled in. If you were here when Tom was here, you saw one of those pictures as well. But this one was 2 right side by side, and I snapped that shot and thought, okay, I got to share that with other people as well. Just plug it in anywhere. And there's a picture of the shops that I was talking about, and a Brahma bull just making his way down the street. I didn't get a picture of, there was one time when we were coming up the street and the traffic had to flow around, and you understand that this is former British, so the traffic flows on the left. So the traffic is flowing around, and we got up close enough. There's just a cow just in the middle of the road. He just laid down. He was chewing his cud, and the traffic is just going around the cow. And so they wander just like pedestrians. And And they're not alone. There are dogs, and there are goats, and there are ducks, and there are chickens, and there's all kinds of things that are wandering, and that's just part of the culture. So let's come into the culture. Number one, it is a Hindu land, and a real strong influence from India. We'll see some pictures here in just a second, but that's I think one of the things that strikes you the most about the culture, other than the poverty, is the Hindu influence. And then it is the birthplace of Buddha, which is really an interesting thought, because Hinduism is not Buddhism. They're two different things. But it is the birthplace of, and they say, Lord Buddha. So that's another aspect of the culture. And then the driving is, I mentioned that it's on the left-hand side of the road. And by the way, they kind of approach lines the same way they approach driving. So if you're standing in a line and you don't move, they're around you. And the same thing is true of driving. I remember hearing this when I was in Peru back in 2001. The only two things that have to work on your car are the horn and the brakes. That's it. Nothing else has to work. And the horns are just ubiquitous. Just beep, 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 beep. And if they're a little bit put out with you, then maybe beep, 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 a little bit longer beep. But basically the beep beeps are just, here I am. I want you to know I'm here, and I'm behind you. I'm coming up on your right. Here in the States, if you're walking on a path and somebody's on a bike, sometimes they'll call from behind you on your left, or they'll ring the bell. That's what you get as far as driving is concerned in Nepal. They have broken white lines in the middle of the street. I have no idea why, other than to say you're supposed to start on the left, coming this way. But I mean, people are all over the road, and they use every inch of the road. And pedestrians will cross in front of the drivers, and the drivers have to be aware of that. Honestly, if you're driving in Nepal, you have to be a very good driver. You really do, because you have to be aware of what's going on from a pedestrian perspective in the road, animals in the road, sometimes laying down, sometimes walking right in front of you, sometimes just standing in front of you. It's amazing. And then we have passing lanes where you can pass. Everywhere is a passing lane. So they just will come right at you, and you have to slow down to make sure they can get around you, and sometimes even back up to make sure they can get around you, and then go forward again. So driving was interesting. And then there was the wildlife. I mentioned the man that came 450 miles, or 450 kilometers. I said, well, you must have taken quite a while. Did you have to drive some during the night? He said, oh, no, you can't drive at night. Well, why not? Well, Bengal tigers. And I said, so did you just during the daytime? You drive during the daytime. So I leave very early in the morning and drive during the daytime. And you think to yourself, well, 200 miles is not that far. You can get that. Well, these are different kinds of roads. A lot of times the road is gone, and you're off onto dirt and slowing down. Speed limits are very much lower. They're not going at, I think the highest speed that I saw was about 55 kilometers an hour, maybe 65 kilometers an hour. So not really making huge time. He said, you can't drive during the night because the tigers are out. I said, well, how many people get killed by tigers? Well, in Nepal, it's somewhere between 20 and 25 a year are killed by Bengal tigers. So wildlife is different there than it is here. They had signs for elephant crossings, and they had rhino crossings, and they had monkeys everywhere. I mean, there were monkeys all over the place once you got out of town. Inside town, all the domesticated, more or less domesticated animals like goats and dogs and so forth were there. But outside, once you got into the countryside, then you had all the other stuff as well. So wildlife was a big part of it. And by the way, in a conversation with one of the men, I said, we were talking about, can you kill animals to eat? Oh, no, that's illegal. I said, is it legal to own a firearm? He said, if you're caught with a firearm, you'll go to jail for a long time. So nobody has firearms except for the military. I didn't even see that on the police, just the military. And then his final comment was interesting to me. He said, animals are more important in Nepal than people. Animals are more important in Nepal than people. And he wasn't mocking that. That was just a statement of fact from his perspective. And then tourism, and the tourism is, yeah, Jan, if you just want to start those now, I kind of forgot about that. Yeah, okay. The tourism is the big #1 item in Nepal, largely because of the Himalayas, but also because of all the temples. They have lots of temples to Hinduism. You know what, we do have to get moving here. I didn't realize how late it was getting. The last thing is that it's a monarchy with a coalition government. So you have the titular head of the government is the king, but then they have a coalition government, somewhat like Britain. The coalition government right now is not what it was the week before we got there. They had the coalition had fallen apart, and they'd done a new coalition, and it was the Maoists and the communists. In Nepal, those are two different things, but you can see that they're going to be somewhat similar. Those two had formed a coalition, and what they call the Congress Party had been, which is the majority party, but they had been on the outside looking in. And so Jan's got some Nepali candies that I brought back. So I'm going to we're going to start those in the back, and you can take one and then pass them up. If you would be so kind as to take one and then pass them up. I want to make sure everybody gets one. So again, just from a cultural perspective, there's one of the Hindu temples. And if you look closely, I don't know if you can tell that in a picture, but that is the figure of a monkey. And that was on one of the road trips. So that's one of the temples. This was in the airport as we came in. Welcome to Nepal, birthplace of Lord Buddha. And then if we can just keep kind of moving through these. This is called a tuk-tuk, sort of an auto rickshaw. So it's got a driver, and I think they call it a tuk-tuk because that's what it sounds like as it's going down the road. Tuk, 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 tuk. And so it's got a driver, and you can put two people in the back, and there's a little shelf that you can put your luggage on if you want to. And this is one of the vehicles that transport us back and forth from the hotel when we were there. And then rickshaws and motorcycles. Who needs a trunk? You know, look at the guy in the motorcycle. There's two people there. They have a big bag of stuff in between them, and he's got two bags between his legs in the front. And we saw, on one occasion, I saw 5 people on one motorcycle. 2 adults, a child wedged in the middle, 2 more adults, and they had 2 bags hanging on the sides of the motorcycle. So just a lot of kind of stuff. You can't really see it very well on this, but the trucks are just colorful. My goodness, the stuff that they've got on the front of the trucks is just amazing. And you see them all over Nepal. And again, you can see the motorcycles there. And monkeys. Thankfully, we didn't see any Bengal tigers, but we did see lots of monkeys. And they just were all over the road. I have numbers of pictures of monkeys. One of them, we had to slow down and stop because they were just sitting in the road. And he's beeping his horn, and they're looking at him like, what do you want? And finally, they got off the road so we could keep going. Rooftop of the world. The first day that we were there, we went up to a place called, I just lost the name of it. Anyway, we went up to a place that was up higher than the capital city, where you could actually see the Himalayas. Unfortunately, the time of the year is bad for this because it's very hazy. So this is about the best picture that I could get. And to the right in the back is Everest. But it was all the way along. You could see the peaks. Okay, I mentioned it's got a constitutional monarchy, coalition government. I already talked about that, so let's keep going. The benefits of the trip. This was a joint venture. It was our whole church was involved in this. I went, but you all are involved. You're involved because you shared your pastor. You're involved because you gave. So this is a joint venture from our whole church, and I think that's an important aspect of this. Another benefit is that it expands the reach of our church. And you say, well, yeah, but we're already sending Tom, and that's true. But it expands the reach of our church from the perspective that not only has one of our missionaries gone, but your pastor is gone. And our church has had the ability to reach out in an expanded way. It has also lengthened the impact of our church from a time perspective, as we talked about earlier. younger pastors and so forth, and being able to see down the road. We've made friends in another culture. I'll be sending a thank you to MD for the shirt this week. I had several of the men who said, I need your expanded notes because what you taught was more than what you had in your notes. And I'm going to be expanding that and sending that back as well. And it also strengthened my appreciation for our missionary. I have a much deeper appreciation for what Tom does. And because of that, I have a much deeper appreciation for what Ken Wells does because of having been on this trip, and also an appreciation for the field. I mentioned the travel. It was about 8,000 miles one way. On the way back, it was about a 16-and-a-half-hour trip, and the lady in front of me decided that she needed to recline. So I had her in my lap for the whole 16-and-a-half hours. Well, part of that time I was sleeping, so I don't remember that part of it. But some really good contacts. I had sat next to three different people who were Hindu. Had really interesting conversations with them. Was able actually to help a couple that was an older couple that was sitting next to me who were coming to the United States for the first time on their way back. Their son lives in Salt Lake, and I let them call their son on my phone, and so we had some interesting opportunities there. A local rancher. He's actually down in the Fowler, La Junta area. Had a conversation with him. On my way out, I had a conversation, I mentioned this last week, with a man who identifies as pagan. And when he texted me, we texted back and forth after the flight. We texted me, and he responded with the blessed be, which is typical for Wiccan and pagan. So, and very interesting conversations. And I had my opportunity to share my card and speak of the gospel with a number of these people. So the contacts from a travel perspective were interesting. And then the challenges, I mentioned the lady, and go ahead and go to the next one. The distance was a challenge. I've never flown that far in one flight, and that was a challenge. The older aircraft, the in-country flights were on older aircraft, and kind of cramped. And you got on the plane thinking, okay, God, I could come and see you today. Looks like this plane could allow that, but that's up to you. So we were fine. And then there's some more pictures from that. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. We flew Qatar Airlines, Qatar. I think they say Qatar Airlines. And then here's the plane that we were going in country. It was a turboprop. And then my observations. That was an excellent team. Really good teachers, really good teammates. I did, even though I was in many respects the odd man out, I never felt that way with them. I always felt like they were just really good. The believers are friendly and enthusiastic. I wish you could hear them pray. They'll start to pray, and then it's not that one person is praying and everyone else is silent and praying silently like we do. They just all pray. They just pray aloud. So the room is filled with prayer. And when they sing enthusiastically. And when they read the scriptures, especially in Manahari, they would read the scriptures, and they would get to the end, and the person reading would say, Amen. And before he could get the men out, the whole room, Amen. It's just the way they responded to the word of God. Often they would stand for the reading of the scriptures. Very, very respectful and excited. Hallelujah. Those Amen and Hallelujah, I knew those words. And they used them over and over and over and over and over again. The Nepali Christian leaders were innovative people. They don't have much, but they just said, what do you need? Okay, let's get it done. And I was really impressed with that. Very poor. One of the things that you'll notice coming from the United States or from any Western culture country is that trash is everywhere. They don't dispose of trash like we do. On a few occasions, I saw people sweeping it up and trying to get it ready, but most of the time it's just done with it, drop it. And then the vehicles are imported. So when you see a car, that car costs whoever bought that car twice what the price of the car is. Nobody manufactures cars in Nepal. They manufacture the cars in India. And the cost of the car in India is then doubled when it's imported into Nepal. It's a 100% import tax in Nepal. So if it's a $20,000 car, then it's going to cost you $40,000, which is why motorcycles are everywhere. A motorcycle, by contrast, is $4,000, and they make them in Nepal, and there's no import tax. So they're everywhere. We had one festival that we were there for. There are 31 in the Hindu calendar every year. When you got over 3 million gods, you got to have a lot of festivals. So the Holi festival was one of those festivals, and it was kind of a 2-day festival spread over 3 days. So they had a festival day, and then they had a day to go, and then another festival day. And the festival day, the first one was bonfires, people splashing color all over each other. You saw all people coming. They would be all green or all red or all orange, and just color was everywhere. And it's in fact, they call it a color festival. It also has to do with the god Krishna and something related to his cohort. So there's a love component to this festival. And then on the second day of the festival, then they butcher. That's the day of the year when you do not want to be a male goat, because they butcher the male goats. They'll keep the females because they're going to reproduce, but they butcher them, and they have them hanging on all these little cubbyhole places that they have. So that was an observation. The shoes come off when entering private buildings, particularly churches and homes. The shoes come off. We didn't have to take our shoes off to go into the hotel or to go into any of the shops. We didn't have to do any of that. But when you went into a private building, the shoes come off. Animals are everywhere. I already mentioned that. Chickens, goats, dogs, ducks. I got a picture of ducks that are pink. I don't know how they got them pink, but they're pink. Water buffalo, cows, and I mentioned the no beef, even hamburgers are. All right, so let's wrap this up. Was it worth the cost? $5,000 is a lot of money. Any way you shake it, it's a lot of money. But $5,000 allowed us the opportunity to have an impact in the lives of each of the people who are teaching, in the lives of about 40 to 45 people. And those 40 to 45 people would never get this kind of instruction in their lifetimes if we didn't do it. So it's an expensive proposition, but I think it was worth the cost from my perspective. You have to answer that question as a church. So whether you think it was worth the cost, I think it was valuable. Was it worthy of future consideration? Now, I'm not saying this from my perspective because, frankly, I'm 67 years old. I don't know how much longer I'll be even in the church. But would it be worthy of you thinking about this in the future, doing this with a pastor? It's a valuable exposure for the pastor as well as for the church, and a valuable exposure to the people in the culture from the perspective of our church. We expose ourselves to them as well in a very positive way. Profitable instruction for them. Is there one more? And and then we get the opportunity to support our missionary and come alongside. I don't know how often I would want to do something like this for somebody that we don't have a relationship with in our church, but to have a relationship with somebody like Tom Carr and to go alongside Tom and support him in his ministry, I think was also a valuable aspect of this and was worthy of our consideration. Is that the end of the slides? Okay. I'm sorry this took a little bit longer. Hopefully it gives you a sense of the ministry and what it was like. And tonight I'm going to wrap up the teaching that we did over there and that we have been doing here on Sunday nights. And depending on the Q&A that we have for this evening for how it all ends, if there's some time at the end, you can do some Q&A on Nepal as well, and I'll be glad to answer questions that you have. I think what we'll do tonight or today, since this kind of a service, let's just stand. We'll be dismissed with a word of prayer. And then if you have some comments that you want to make or questions that you want to ask afterwards, I'm glad to